and transitioning them. It just seems like they just went through this process. So can you tell us what Opal brings to the table for those accounts and how difficult it is to transition them? Will they transition, and what is your goal there?
Yeah, so let's put it into three buckets. So we had sort of the legacy HintMD customers that were on a platform that were using a variety of services too, like subscription services and everything. When we acquired HintMD, we recognized that while those services added a lot of value, in the absence of the PayFac functionality, that onboarding new accounts and supporting those different service functions was going to be incredibly resource and labor intensive. And that given, we wanted this to be a little bit more turnkey, we said, let's turn off some of the functionality on the base HintMD platform for new accounts that we're now going to bring on and really make it about, transaction processing and cost. And so those were the new accounts that we've been bringing on the HintMD platform. So it's been, hey, start with us today. We can process your transactions. We can do it in a way that's very competitive. And you get your foot in the door so that when we turn on the PayFac functionality, you'll have a relationship with us. And so that's been the group that we've been onboarding. We've long talked about, moving to PayFac functionality, which will now start to unlock a much more seamless way to turn on, data insight and analytics, subscription services, and white label loyalty. So we, went through sort of the beta testing of that in, the summer in Q3. We've now sort of have that platform ready to roll, and we've renamed the whole brand Opal because we think that that is going to be a brand that fits better with kind of what we're building. So, we are in the process now of onboarding accounts on Opal that will get competitive rates, but we'll also have the ability to start to turn on some of this functionality. And then as you've talked, that migration of folks from the Hint platform to Opal will take place organically over time. And in the meantime, we'll support both platforms. It will certainly be more efficient to migrate them all to one platform over time, but we're trying to be mindful of let's not disrupt things. And that's why I think, this back half of the year is while we're still looking to drive deeper penetration, part of this was getting Opal running, getting that functionality, and then start to figure out how to move accounts over. But obviously, long term, the whole vision of this has been a payments platform that has the ability to provide a bunch of other value-added services to these accounts around, again, data insight and analytics, subscription services, white label loyalty, and other things like that.
Okay, and how should we think about the revenues here? They haven't been particularly large. So do we think about revenues based on the same assumptions of you get a certain number of accounts, a certain percentage of their business goes through this PayFac platform, and we take a cut of that? I mean, how should we even model it? I don't think anyone has a good idea of how what kind of revenue generation you can get from this.
Yeah, I think that's why we've tried to guide people to look at processing volume as the leading indicator. So how much sort of practice volume? Because again, the PayFac, when we're successfully introducing it into a practice, isn't just being used for our products; it's being used for all practice purchases through the credit card system. And so we think that the right way to look at this is overall volume that we are processing through our fintech platform. We've long talked about there being sort of 50 to 100 basis points of margin that we believe we can participate in once we get up and running at scale. Obviously, right now, that margin is much lower. And part of that is due to when we were rolling out the HintMD platform, in the absence of some of this other functionality, the only real reason for accounts to switch in the near term was if there was some sort of economic incentive. And we sort of felt like the actual cost of us once we get this system installed is not that significant. So let's be a good partner during the pandemic and try and provide additional value to these accounts. Let's go ahead and get it installed, provide them some economic incentives. And then as we start turning on these services, we can start to participate in this margin stream that we think is in the 50 to 100 basis points. So in the near term, I think that we're trying to guide the street to look at our overall revenue and account growth. And then over time, we'll start to show how we are going to unlock more margin.
Okay, got it. All right, turning to therapeutics. I don't want to ignore that. you've put the filing of cervical dystonia on pause. Obviously, that's because of the manufacturing. But you have gotten past that long-term safety hurdle. You obviously put out data. It was repeat studies. It was very consistent with what you've seen before. So that's great. Can you just clarify for the street the rationale of holding back on the cervical dystonia? Obviously, you know, maybe you could get the FDA started in reviewing that. Just talk about that rationale for us.
Yeah, so the supplemental BLA strategy with our cervical dystonia program has always been sort of the view, which is you get the glabellar lines indication approved, and then you submit a supplemental BLA to get approved on the back of it. You know, the agency has not provided separate BLA approvals for different indications. They've smushed them all together. So it feels like we're going to go through this process no matter what. And we think that the most efficient way to get CD approved is via the sBLA path. Is there a scenario where post a Type A meeting, we could revisit that and submit a separate, you know, CD BLA? Possibly, but we don't see that as really the strategy or the option that makes the most sense. And we're hopeful that we'll get glabellar line indication approved in a reasonable time frame, and then, you know, the sBLA can get filed on the CD application afterwards.
Okay. And then again, on the ULS phase 3, why hold back? I mean, should we read anything into the confidence around, you know, the timing of sorting out these manufacturing issues? Presumably you have the same product they're going to be using that your current manufacturing process is producing. So, you know, explain that. And is it more of a cash preservation mode for you at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's the latter of what you mentioned. I think that given where we are, and my commentary at the beginning, even though we're sitting on 273 million at the end of Q3, we had to streamline the priorities. And it's like, don't compromise the commercial launch and success of the RHA filler line, continue to drive adoption of Opal, get our BLA approved, which is priority number one, and preserve financial flexibility. And when you go through that exercise, as optimistic and excited as we are about the therapeutic space, starting additional phase 3 trials have a significant amount of cost. And those indications or the approval for certainly ULS is a few years out. So we're no less committed to it and no less excited about it. But in this sort of interim phase, we thought it's prudent, given that we're between phase 2 and phase 3 programs. And this is a pause. This isn't a change in strategy. It's just like, you know, we've got to make choices. We sort of said, let's just kind of push that out. And then once we get clarity from the Type A meeting, spinning that up and getting started is something that would be pretty straightforward.
Okay, great. And then, you know, just in the last minute, investors were obviously concerned about this cash preservation. So how should we think about that OpEx trajectory going forward? You know, the savings that you have during this period. I mean, obviously you have some reduced R&D spend because CD long-term study is over, reduced promotional spend with DAXI right now. So, you know, you still have the infrastructure though for RHA and Opal. So how should we think about the cost savings that you can potentially have, the magnitude of it?
Toby, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it in a thoughtful way. You know, we had planned another leg up through 2022 on sort of investment in international, investment in therapeutics, investment in the launch of therapeutics. So there was a significant amount of fixed investment, and further, there was a fair amount of fixed investment to get DAXI to where it is for a glabellar lines launch. So when DAXI is approved, obviously there's incremental spend for demonstration product, for you know customer activation, whether that or injector trainings. Obviously those things are paused right now, but you know, we really like the cost structure that we have, and we think that when you get DAXI, you can layer that on and, you know, have a lot of operating leverage on the aesthetic side.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad I was thoughtful about the question. I really wanted numbers, but I guess I'll wait for your 2022 guidance. All right, guys. I think we're out of time, but thank you for the conversation. It was informative, and I'm hoping we can get some answers soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Annabelle.